Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Link is available in the description below. And if you have any feedback for us or for the exchange, DM them, leave them in the comments. We'll be sure to send them to the right place. Now, Don, you sold, so you're a traitor. The most difficult question, I think, to deal with is whether the monthly timeframe Respecters Club is willing to re-accept you as a member. Because you made some really rude, inflammatory statements when the market was trading into monthly resistance, and then you came to your senses halfway through the monthly candle. I'm just not sure whether too much damage was done reputationally, publicly, and with such flagrant disregard for this amazing time frame to sort of accept you back into the brotherhood. So I guess, what do you have to say for yourself?
Nah, I was just testing the conviction of other people, you know?
Wow, okay, that's how you're doing it.
No, this was just a test all along. I wanted to see who's actually a monthly time frame believer, and a lot of people failed. Wasn't me.
Wasn't me.
I was never disrespecting it in the first place. I was just pretending.
Right. Very compelling. Despite the several public calls for fuck the monthly time frame or fuck the monthly resistance, here we are. Also, you sent out this tweet. Actually, you've been sending out many tweets. I hope you're okay. But this one specifically, I've had it with trading. This year has been amazing. I'm taking a break till next year. My followers, it's all over. We're all doomed. Call the ambulance. A meteorite is going to hit the Earth. Nuclear war is coming. He's calling for zero. Now, I sort of understand the sentiment you're poking fun at. However, it's not like you sold for no reason whatsoever, right? And it was completely atechnical, and you just reached some boredom/busyness threshold and decided to exit the market. There were technical and flow, fundamental, narrative-related reasons that contributed to your decision-making. Like, if we were mooning through the monthly and trading like, I don't know, 39, 40 plus, etc., maybe you'd not, would have acted differently. Isn't that fair? Like, I think that tweet just comes across as a bit like, oh, it could have been anything. Don't worry, guys, I'm just tired. Whereas in reality, as per your Wednesday stream, there are layers to that decision, right?
Oh, I mean, there's always layers. I'm just making a little bit of fun of the people that are just kind of like completely losing their mind, because at the end of the day, I'm not really in a trade right now, right? Like, it's not like I'm short or anything. It's just me closing trades. So that isn't like, I think the chances of it going down are higher than the chances of it going up, but I don't have strong conviction, and I wouldn't want to bet anything on it, right? So at the end of the day, like, I could be wrong, and I wouldn't even consider it like being super wrong at this point, because I don't have a position open. I'm just flat. So for me, this whole drama seems a little bit much. Like, people have been going nuts over this. I don't really get it, because I mean, just because I think there's a chance it goes down a little bit doesn't have to mean anything. And the fact that I'm not even betting on it should kind of like have people chill a little bit. Like, if this was the other way around and I was like buying a shitload of Bitcoin, then maybe, but I'm not selling a shitload of Bitcoin. I'm just like, I sold what I had, and I'm not shorting or not doing anything in terms of trading. So yeah, people need to chill a little bit.
Fair enough. To be honest, like, some of the commentary based on you closing the swing long, with the risk reward tool from 16K or whatever, with the stop at zero, your favorite, that fateful decision. But you outlined some scenarios where it was like, oh, well, if it nukes, I'll buy it maybe, and then if it moons, above 38K, even if I don't buy it, that's like a better entry or whatever. You're just talking about that, and then people naturally talking shit in the comments, being like, oh, you're gonna miss the ETF, or oh, you're getting rid of your position as soon as it's getting good. Dude, if I were in your position, you're a much better man than I am, because I would be ego tripping my fucking balls off if I called the 15K long so publicly. I'd be like, who the fuck are you? Where were you? Show me your 15K tweets, you little bitch. It's been 2x. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Get out of my mentions. I'd be so disgusting as a human being. But that kind of commentary is really weird. Like, you've just watched someone with a large account, which is only a downside because it's a pain in the ass. This public accountability element. Large account, infinite reply guys. Manage a 2x swing long from the bottom on BTC. Amidst all the influencer scams, pump and dumps, trade both ways, microcap bullshit, all of that, right? Mysteriously appearing P&L cards, the whole Twitter charade, and then you still choose that person to be the sort of object of your critique after they've closed a trade that was like a banger, no matter how you measure it. It's just, I feel like I had to get that off my chest, because it's probably the most definitive proof that you can't make everyone happy, or in some cases anyone happy. Like no matter what you do, bottom to top, top to bottom, or just catch like a really good leg, someone will ultimately be dissatisfied with what you've done with your own money, which is such a fucking ridiculous statement as well. But I'm kind of glad, to be honest, that you've sort of flattened out and taken a more passive approach, because I feel like you were starting to approach main character escape velocity. And then main characters always end up like dead, broke, or in jail. And I don't like most of those for you. So
most, not all, but most.
So I'm sort of glad you've taken a step back. However, the caveat there is, I'm not sure whether to believe you. Because, you know, on the one hand, you're like, I might wake up and this will be at 60K, and then fuck the monthly resistance. And then the next day, it's just kidding. It's probably going to go down, and also monthly resistance is based. So you saying I'm taking a step back, I'm going to go to sleep feeling comfortable. Like, okay, I'm not going to miss that much on upside. And then tomorrow morning, like, oh, I rebought all my BTC. What an amazing offer based on where I sold. Fucking send it back to 60K. So I don't know, man. Your word is mush, surely.
I mean, I did kind of like take the money off of trading accounts. So I couldn't even rebuy if I wanted to. So that is very, very unlikely. So I'm like literally like I've moved a lot of the money out of crypto into the real world.
The demo money, right? Just
yeah,
to be clear.
Exactly. Yeah. So like even if I wanted to, it would take a couple of days to get back in. So that is very likely not to like gonna happen. And in general, like going into end of year, right? And this is something that people just kind of like ignore. There's also like tax season coming, right? Like at least I don't know how the Americans have it, because it's different than it is in Germany. But for me, basically it's important to have a little bit of consolidated positions or no positions at all going into basically the new year. So for me, doesn't really make much sense to open anything new, do all that kind of stuff. What I'm doing right now and what I've been doing is basically been cleaning up all of this stuff. So I've been selling some NFTs. I've been moving some ETH, unbridging, like all that kind of stuff. That's what I've been doing in the last few days. And that means like even if I wanted to jump back in, I couldn't, and it wouldn't make sense. So on that front, don't have to be worried about me just changing my mind. What you have to be worried about more than me changing my mind is just the market doing something that I'm not expecting, or like that you're not expecting. Because yeah, whether I change my mind or not shouldn't really matter too much. People should just make up their own kind of minds and trades and whatever. Something I've been aware of lately is that people have just been blindly copy trading me, and I'm not necessarily liking that. The kind of private profile on Twitter has been helping a lot. I think that's kind of preventing me from becoming a main character in general, because I just don't get the new people. And I've been blocking left, right, and center, because I think people just kind of like it makes it so much nicer. Like the private profile plus blocking or muting people. It's such a
my alt accounts have been falling like flies, mate.
Yeah, no, but it makes it much nicer. But yeah, people should kind of make up their own stuff, make their own trades, because at the end of the day, if you're always copy trading me, a lot of the stuff that I put out is kind of ironic, sarcasm, jokes, whatever, and I feel like a lot of people just kind of don't get that.
Mate, I must be the only person on the fucking planet who doesn't copy trade you as like a religion, because certainly in the last few months that's picked up a lot. You sometimes don't help it with like the cryptic disappearing duck tweet, which is really funny. But yeah, no, I agree, and also it sort of, I don't know, diminishes at least some degree of the work we do on the newsletter and Casual Friday, etc., where the whole point is to sort of have a discussion, give you a framework, etc. It's like, oh, I watched this 2-hour video, I'm going to copy the duck anyway. It's like, oh, fuck, okay. Or my favorite, when they comment on Monday Markets videos, where it's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Just copy trade Don. I'm like, okay, great. Well, can I marry his wife too and have his child? Like, how does this work? Do I have to copy trade him in all aspects of my existence? It gets pretty, that rabbit hole goes deep. I will say, on a technical front, one thing I found funny is I was, you know what? I'd make a really good DonAlt hater, because I do my research. I was going back like 2-3 weeks on your Wednesday streams. And for one of them, you were talking about the weekly time frame being like, this is the all-time best setup in crypto, makes for amazing tops, makes for amazing bottoms, this macro range reclaim, whatever, at 32K. And then I was just looking, if you took that setup on the weekly time frame from the close to, where the market is right now, or even, let's say, from the candle close that validated the setup to the high, that's like 10%. So it's like, this is a once-in-generation mega reclaim, all bull signal. Might wake up, it'll be at 60K. Holy shit, everyone's underexposed. The Cointelegraph ETF leak just made everyone realize how sidelined they are. And in the setup prints, it's like 10%. Oh, fuck it, taxes, and bye. So that was quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I think in general, like, we're in a really weird position right now, just with the market as a whole, with the whole kind of pump being ETF kind of led, if you can say that. Like, basically everyone is speculating on the Bitcoin ETF, right? Like, it's pretty fair to say this, even as, like, I mean, just looking at it objectively, right? Like, why are people buying? It's because of the Bitcoin ETF, right? So we're in this weird situation where the pump is basically news-based more than anything else. And I think the moment that sentiment shifts, it can get dangerous, and you can get wipeouts. This is kind of where we've had the whole, when the ETH ETF also got announced, we got this massive wipeout candle. And I mean, that is still the top, right? To, like, even now. Because I think that kind of did a little bit of damage to that whole narrative, which kind of, to come back to your point, which kind of makes the weekly time frame a little bit tough to trade, because it's a technical setup and I really like it. And I still, like, if I look at the weekly time frame, the only, like, if there was only one time frame and I had no more information than just that time frame, there's no way in hell that I would be anything but bullish, right? But then if you zoom out and you look at the monthly time frame, and you see that we're kind of trading at resistance, and you see the whole narrative, it gets a little bit easier to be bearish. But I still think, in general, and this is something that I've kind of been trying to get across, I think there's still good reasons to go up and good reasons to go down. I think it's basically, it was pretty certain to me that this was going to go up for basically the entire last year. I went back through my tweets, and when I bought was actually the 16th of November, and I sold on the 16th of November, or like not the 16th, but like yesterday I checked it and it was the 16th of November. So I sold a day or two before that. But yeah, I pretty much had strong conviction to the upside for basically a full year. And now it's just basically like 50-50, right? Like, I could go up, could go down. I don't like those odds. Like, I don't like being in a 50-50 situation when I have to rely on news more than anything. But yeah, we'll see how this all turns out. I don't really know. And but it's nice that we kind of had this year, like this rally leading into year end, because it makes it easier to take profit for me and just kind of roll it and have taxes be easy this year, be able to take off for the new year and for Christmas. I might regret that if the market like goes completely ballistic, but I after a year like this, I don't think you can have too many regrets.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Germany's GDP being revised upwards due to huge tax incomes. That'll be a fun bit of news to trade on the Bund. Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. If we look at the technical view, I think one of the tensions that we've been pointing out on Casual Friday and the newsletter specifically, because it's so annoying, is the disagreement between the monthly and the weekly, right? So these are probably the best. If you're a strict candle close oriented technical trader, whatever, some people use the term retard to encapsulate all of those approaches, but we'll go with the more formal version. The monthly is at resistance, whereas the weekly is above it and looks very good. And it's not uncommon for these timeframes to diverge from one another, simply because the monthly contains 4 weekly candles. There's some quick maths for you. However, they don't usually stay unaligned for long, right? One of them ends up falling in line with the other, and you get usually quite big moves if the monthly and weekly are pointing in the same direction. And that's what makes this sort of mid 30K area really tricky. Because if you're a bear tard, you have ammo, and your ammo is macro monthly retest. with a bunch of altcoin froth and other stuff that you mentioned on Wednesday. And if you're a bull, you have one of the best weekly setups that we've had in a long time, and it's still valid at the moment. So you're either early to the monthly time frame breaking resistance because the weekly is paving the way, or this is the wick of the monthly test of resistance, and that doesn't end particularly well. One other note I wanted to make very quickly before we discuss the time frame divergence is I think this is a really reasonable area to manage trades in general, because a lot of stuff starts to look really wrong below 32K, right? Yeah. Like the big picture really starts to shift because we had, the impulse candle on the 16th of October weekly was kind of, it was a good move, but it wasn't crazy because it was still within the range. But it's the 23rd of October weekly candle that was really significant in terms of breaking us out of the preceding consolidation and also reclaiming 32K in doing so. And since then, we've had a couple of weeks of upside. Or, we had one good week and prices sort of trading around that same week now. Like if you're managing trades, probabilistically, below 32K, I just think a lot of stuff starts to look pretty shitty. You no longer have the disagreement between the monthly and the weekly. And at that point, the weekly starts to look bad in an already sort of questionable / at resistance monthly chart. And if you manage to catch this early and you're riding it and you're not managing at 32K, I think below 32K, the odds of this morphing into something much uglier and a failed breakout increase quite a bit. And at that point, if you're still not doing anything with it, there's a real risk that even if you caught like a good entry from the breakout or whatever else, you kind of just give it back by being complacent in the 30,000s. So it's like a very important area, as cliche as that sounds, because you have the time frame sort of disagreement that we mentioned, but also from a trade management perspective, if you're using the big weekly candle as your invalidation or anything of that nature, you're giving back like a really big chunk that would also sort of disproportionately affect how the chart looks, and not in a good way.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the reasons why I manage my trades, because I just in general I think. Yeah, it's tough, basically. Like, this is a tough spot, and it's been easy in quotation marks, but it's been clear enough for me. It is not clear anymore. And yeah, I'm just counting my ducks at this point.
Fine. What is monthly support? Here's the real question, right? So if this is a macro, because I think we've talked about upside targets plenty, right? Like if the weekly reclaim signal supersedes monthly resistance, then sort of 44 to 46K is like a decent monthly. Sorry, yeah, it's the monthly range midpoint and weekly cluster. So there is some structure there in the 40s. But otherwise, it's sort of the range high, which DonAlt of day before yesterday was really enjoying at around 60K. So those are really clear. But in terms of support, it's less clear, at least in my mind, because if this is a bearish retest on the monthly time frame and the close sort of, confirms it, whatever that means, where is the earliest, where do you bid a rejection of that nature? Because from a strictly technical point of view, the answer is 30K, but that seems way too close. Like if 35K is a macro bearish retest, etc., and we have all this news and it doesn't go anywhere, like $5,000 lower doesn't seem big enough for a monthly rotation, or is that Bertard sort of logic?
What could happen, right, is that this monthly just kind of wicks towards like 30K and then closes okay-ish again, or like let's say this monthly closes like at 35 and then you wick next month towards 30, 29, 28, and then you close back up again. At that point, this bearish retest wouldn't look that bad, right? So that's one way that 30K does something. But yeah, if you want to have like a proper support, I think anything between 20 and 23K is massive. I don't think we're gonna go below that. So that's kind of like, that's where I would, if I had to make a stand, right? And I'm glad I don't have to, but if I had to make a stand, that's where I would do it. And if the market nukes into January, right? That's the only level that I would really be interested in buying. For this, I would push money back into the crypto markets just to get some action, because I think that's, if it gets there, the market has to be really, really stupid. And I think at that point, it's a trade like it's a great trading opportunity. It might even be better than buying 16K, right? So if you get to buy 20 to 23, I think that's massive, and I would love to do that. I wouldn't bet on the price going all the way down there, but that's kind of the major level that I would want to be buying. Otherwise, yeah, like I said, a wick towards 30K looks pretty interesting to me. Like I think that would get me that would kind of make me see the bullish case again, more so than the bearish case.
That's all it takes, Don. Just one dip and you're shoveling money right back in from
No, I'm if it goes to 30K like in the next week or two, I wouldn't be putting money back in.
It's fine. Just we'll shove our Reflink money in there, you know. Our treasury. That was going to be my next question, by the way. I was going to say, for consistency's sake, in previous discussions, we've spoken about the 32K weekly level being sort of a do or die best one based on proximity to invalidation. And I think in the newsletter, we even had something like, well, 30K essentially as a permissible wick zone. So presumably, even if the monthly is kind of looking a bit shaky, or at least doing something with 2 weeks left, if the weekly goes to 30 to 32K, that argument from weeks prior that is the best / only area to do business based solely on proximity to invalidation, is that belief still valid?
Yes. The problem is that at that point, like if that happened, if we dumped towards 32 before monthly close, or like even 30, then you have a terrible monthly candle, and that needs to be fixed. And then you're kind of like in the same situation that you're in right now.
Yeah, but you just say fuck the monthly, right? You've done it before, you'll do it again. No, to be fair, that makes sense. It'd be almost better if it dipped after the monthly close, right?
Yes.
But this is getting pretty esoteric, right? In terms of when should it dip to this all important support to make the monthly time frame look palatable?
Yeah, but for me, I kind of like, if we get a bad monthly close, I want to be out the next monthly anyway. So that would be the December month. And then we can kind of like rediscuss things in January. If the monthly closes well, I mean, then I think December could go well. I'd probably be too lazy to push stuff back in. I don't really like buying stuff when it's up. Don't really care too much. So we're in this weird situation where if it goes down, would I buy? Probably not. If it goes up, would I buy? Probably not. That's why I made that tweet, right? Where I said, like, there's these 3 possibilities where the market can go and what the market can do. And I'm not going to do any of them. Like I said, the only kind of way for me to be buying back in before the year is over is below 25. And that is very unlikely to happen. But that'd be the only way. Like, I give it like not even 5% chance that this happens before year end, that we go back to 25. I think it's even less than 5%, but that would be the only way. So I'm kind of just happy to be sidelined. And then you should take my kind of takes with that in mind, right? Like, I really don't want to be buying. And something crazy would have to happen for that to kind of stop, and for me to actually want to be buying again. And yeah, that's something that I'm not expecting. So
okay, yeah, I think that's all pretty reasonable. I just want some resolution to this monthly, weekly tug of war.
Yeah,
I don't like
so
when
annoying,
mum and dad fight. You know, I've had enough of that in my personal life. Not to divulge. But yeah, this could use some alignment for sure. But I think that's really it for BTC. Do you want to mention the daily time frame? We had a weird bit of price action with the delay being short term. The market pumping on delay was not something I expected. I was pretty surprised. And then it gave back a lot of that, and here we are sort of halfway between those two candles. Is there anything on the daily time frame that is at least technically compelling, even if not enough to bait you back in? Or is it strictly weekly, monthly, and the daily is a scam?
Yeah, I mean, the daily above 38, like if you get a close above 38, maybe that starts looking interesting.
It's your favorite breakout buy in that case, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it. But like, if you're just asking me like what would be interesting on the daily time frame, 38 would be. Otherwise 30K. Those are the two kind of lines in the sand that I have. As in, like, if you get a wick towards 30K, if I was still actively trading, if I didn't kind of set myself up for not trading, I would probably take a stab at 30K if I got to. Still don't know if that's gonna happen, but Yeah, so that's kind of like the levels. Just looking at the chart is just hideous, right? Like it just looks like, and this could also be happening the next 6 weeks, that we just literally stay at the same price and just chop everyone to death. I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah,
and this is kind of how it looks like. Right? I mean, just look at the last 2 candles. That's just complete and utter destruction, and wouldn't be surprised if that just keeps going.
Yeah, of course, as soon as you exit, you become masochistic that this thing is never going to trend. It's going to take your money for 6 weeks. No surprise there. Makes sense, though. I think that's really it for BTC. I guess the big themes are monthly close. If the monthly close is good, then we'll have alignment, and that's positive because the 2 most important timeframes are agreeing with each other. If the monthly close is shit-ish, that's not great, but 30 to 32k is still worth a stab, because if that fails, then we're going to zero, basically. And anything below 30 to 32k, at that point, you have to assume the monthly bearish retest has taken over, and the thing is fucked, basically. At least from a technical perspective. Okay, we'll cover the flow-related stuff in more towards the news segment, like why is the ETH ETF not necessarily the most bullish thing in the short term. We kind of wrote about it as well, but it's worth some discussion. Speaking of ETH, ETH BTC still one of the best charts in crypto. From a technical perspective, at least, because price-wise, still not doing all too great. I mean, if someone told you without the BTC ETF or without all the preceding context that there'd be an announcement for an ETH BTC ETF, hey, at this rate, we'll get one of those as well, specifically for an Ethereum ETF, and that this is the chart that you would get, or even the 2-3 weeks of price action around it, you'd be hard-pressed to believe it, right?
Yeah.
But I think it goes to show how shit this particular market has been, where everyone wants to be long this thing on the way down because of this assumption, not unreasonable, but assumption of outperformance when the cycle sort of kicks off. Certainly, sort of mid cycle is where it really picks up. So we already have rose-tinted glasses when it comes to ETH. But then you have this really technical downtrend that's just been getting hammered, and it has been very technical. So there's no real excuse for being faked out on that front, because it's certainly really gone one way. And then you finally get a bit of good news, and the most it can do, at least at the moment, is get faded into the range low, which is that 057 level we've discussed ad nauseam. I mean, at this point, if the spot ETF can't even cause a local reclaim of support 10 resistance, what the fuck is it going to take? Because I'm really not sure. This is one of those classic, you look at the impact of news to infer the strength of the market. And this is like really good news, and the reaction is really shit. I think even if it just rallied a little bit, I'd be like, wow, that's kind of crappy. I expected more. But it couldn't even do that. It just gave us a bearish retest. It's some Larry Fink exit pump into resistance. He's got TA people sitting in the back office being like, boss, it's time. It's at the range low. And he's like, okay, release the news. That obviously doesn't happen, although some chart people will presumably tell you that it does. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like this thing is heavy as fuck. I don't have any intelligent commentary on it other than wait for it to actually do something constructive. But that's been the commentary for the last X months, and it hasn't.
Pretty much been a year now. Yeah, I mean, I look at this thing, right, and I could literally not point. Like, if I didn't know exactly which candle it was that was caused by the ETF announcement, you couldn't tell, right? Like, this is legit. Looks like there was no news, no positive news. Like, this would exactly look the same if there was no news, I think. The market was kind of relief rallying a little bit, and ETH did its part. That's a terrible, terrible thing to happen, right? Like, if you're bullish, like if you get the best news, I mean, because look at what Bitcoin did, right? Bitcoin literally, we got the same news. This is quite nice because you can just compare the two. We got the same news for Bitcoin and for ETH. Bitcoin went from 25 to 38k, right? Bitcoin being a much larger asset, much slower moving, is what you'd think anyway. It went up 50%. The same news, it set itself up for like a really, really good weekly. Came back into the range, reclaimed the range low on the weekly time frame. It did rally into monthly resistance, but it's still like it did a bunch of stuff, right? ETH did nothing. The same news, nothing. single-digit percentage move off of the news. The funny thing is, like, I actually pivoted into ETH when I saw the news, which was like basically into the pump candle. And me pivoting into it and then selling 24 hours later, literally, or like less than 24 hours later, was me catching the bottom and the top, right? Bitcoin rallied for weeks afterwards, which just basically means you have really good news. It's very obvious that it's very good news because, like I said, the entire Bitcoin pump was based on it, and it did nothing, which is very, very bearish. If this was an ETH, like the entire timeline would be making fun of this thing. But it's ETH, so people are trying to catch the bottom. And yeah, just from that perspective, from the trading the news part, right? This is like would be enough for me to be bearish. Like I wouldn't even need to see the chart. I'd just be like, look at the percentage that the news cost, the percentage moves that the news cost, and I'd be like, okay, this is just bearish, right? But then I look at the chart, and what I see is like an almost 3-year range that broke to the downside, that got positive news, that rallied price right back into the range low, and then immediately rejected. I mean, it doesn't really get worse than that, right? Like you couldn't make a worse kind of chart plus whatever you want to call the news thing happen if you wanted to. Like it doesn't get more bearish than that. So just from looking at it, to me this looks like it wants to go much lower, and it trades like it wants to go much lower. Now, obviously, it could turn around at any point, could set a high or low. Maybe it's all a bait, whatever. But I'm not really in the business of like calling stuff, like calling breakdowns bait. The same is for breakouts, right? Like you're not gonna see me be like, okay, this is bait on a breakout. I'm gonna be like, okay, this is probably real, and then I'm gonna change my mind the moment it comes back. So it's the same for ETH. It broke down. I'm gonna call it a real breakdown, unless it kind of reclaims the range. I think that you can consider a reclaim to be legit above 0.062. It's pretty straightforward. It's not too far away from current price. I mean, it is a double-digit percentage, right? But it's considering with what ETH has done before and how it usually trades, 10% don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, right? So I think it's very easy to kind of just be defensive on this. And we've been defensive on this for pretty much a year, and it's done as well, because those 10%, like if they happen over and over and over again, where you're like, okay, it just needs to take this high, and it doesn't, and it goes lower, and you're like, okay, now it needs to take the next high. At some point, it all adds up. And I mean, currently ETH is basically down 30% from the range highs. So those like little percentages that we kind of keep moving down, which is a sentiment of how we try to be bullish this thing when you think about it, right? Like when you kind of be like, when you're like, I'm bearish, but I'm moving my invalidation on the bearishness lower and lower and lower and lower because I want to be bullish this thing. It's not necessarily how you have to be trading. You could just be like, hey, this is turning more and more bearish over time. I should be more and more bearish. But instead, it's been like, okay, bearish, but and this is the only thing that I see. A lot of people don't even say bearish; they're saying bullish, but it's currently like just getting manipulated. Or
I would prefer it above this level.
Yeah, it's not how it works.
Yeah, I love that kind of analysis. I mean, analysis is, doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. But yeah, I agree in terms of ETH. It's at the moment just really hard to make that argument, at least from a technical point of view. ETH USD is a very interesting one because the weekly, I don't know if you've ever heard of this level, Don. It's this 1935 hidden level, really subtle, doesn't really stand out, but if you look closely enough and zoom in, and you've got TradingView Pro and you tilt your head to the side a little bit, you can kind of see some action there. So we closed above it, which was good, but we're back, which is not good. This is technically at support from a strictly weekly candle close type approach. But the fact that the breakout got stuffed at the local high at 2.1K, the fact that ETH BTC looks how it looks, and the fact that we've had the spot ETF announcement, and essentially within the same time period, the market is retesting the multi-month resistance, or pretty much year-long resistance that it just broke out of, that sucks. man. I mean, that's a technical term, obviously, but that's a bad look. And I think again, your BTC comparison would be really apt here in terms of what strength on breakouts looks like. And a weak breakout into a local high that immediately retraces back into support is not exactly the same as what BTC was offering. Now it's still support, right? Like it's the level's a level, fine, it's there. But if you look at it in totality, like the reaction to the news plus ETH BTC plus BTC monthly resistance, outside of short-term trading, it makes it really hard to punt this with any conviction. And also, I think if it loses 1.9k, and that's what the fight is going to be for over the weekend, it seems, then you just kind of have to admit this thing is absolutely cursed on both pairs, right? Because then the picture would be that ETH BTC, spot ETF news, bearish retest of the range low closed below, ETH USD, spot ETF news, spike 2k, and then lose weekly support. And that's just fucking awful. So hopefully, the strong language makes this thing bottom. But yeah, that's... how different can it get from the BTC reaction? I don't know. Like the daily time frame, I've basically stopped looking at because it's an abomination and a crime against humanity. But looking at the weekly and the ETH BTC pairs, it's still really hard. And I think I agree with your analysis. Like we're trying, right? Like give us a reason, give us an excuse to be constructive on this thing in a way that makes sense contextually, even if you're conservative. But this thing is making it really tricky, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's just let's like I've been trying to be frank on this, but I mean it's just bearish. Like when you just look at ETH BTC, that's a bearish chart. It doesn't get more bearish than this.
It's pre-bullish. That's what it is. Then.
I mean, yeah, but then let it be bullish so I can buy it. Like I don't want to buy pre-bullish. I want to buy bullish. But yeah, I mean it's a bearish chart. There's no need to sugarcoat it. It could turn into a bullish chart quite quickly, right? Or at least, I mean, I'd be willing to argue that it doesn't, like, it's not the greatest chart no matter what happens, given kind of like how it's been trading. But if it gives one good excuse to be bullish, I'll be bullish, and I'd be very happy to be bullish. Until then, I will just hate on it. Because that's fun. People get really upset, and for some reason, it makes me happy. So that's gonna continue until I see a good reason. And I mean, there was a good reason, right? Like just a week ago, where we got the ETH ETF announcement, and I bought ETH pretty much immediately, and then it just didn't fucking move, and then I sold it for 5% gain, which is hilarious to think about. Like I bought the news, I got in pretty low. And I got 5%, and I sold very close to the top. I mean, that's just fucking sad, right? So there you have it. It's a bearish chart. I would like to say something different, but I cannot. So I'll stick with that.
Understandable. Yeah, looking forward to this thing doing something other than this.
I mean, I would like it. I would like it to dump just like 30, 40, 50%, and then it's easy buy.
I mean, it just feels like this slow bleed on ETH BTC especially is agonizing. It's like just rip the band-aid off, take it to 0.04 or whatever, or just under, just like a fuck off candle. Because it feels like, I mean, this range has broken down and now been bearishly retested. But if you were to consider the sentiment or, the average outlook, it doesn't seem to be the prevailing view that this thing has broken down from like a 120-week range or whatever, That just doesn't... the sentiment doesn't reflect what's the technical reality. And so again, we have a divergence, and one of them is bluffing. Either the technical breakdown isn't given its due because the market just doesn't believe it or thinks it's not going to result in continuation to the downside, or it's just mega complacency, right? Like, oh well, ETH is ETH, it always outperforms, Bitcoin's a pet rock type of thing, and now that we're entering a new bull market, also an assumption, this thing is it'll be fine, it's just getting hammered in the short term because of this ETF thing. My guess, at least at the moment, is that it's complacency. Because it just looks really bad, and it's looked really bad for a while. And now that you've had the spot ETF as a reason to reverse even local trend, the fact that hasn't happened, and there's still, at least in the chart, not a lot of panic surrounding that, I think that is evidence of complacency more so than a mispricing. But I guess time will tell.
It feels very, very complacent. It feels like it should just like legit do like a 20% down day on ETH BTC, and then then we can talk about capitulation, right? Because that's the thing. Like, you can be bullish when there's reclaims, or you can be bullish on capitulation, but it's really hard to make the capitulation argument right now because it's just been bleeding, right?
Yeah,
like
bullish bleed is like not a thing for a reason.
Yeah, like if something loses 1% a day, right? Like like that's not capitulation, not in crypto, right? Like if the percentage doesn't really get faster, like you don't, it's not like this thing was losing like nothing and now is losing like 10% a day. It's literally just been like 0.1% a day on the ratio since the top, basically, pretty consistently. We've had like 2 or 3 weeks of where it sped up a little bit, but now it's kind of back to kind of just sideways, going down slowly. Very hard to make a capitulation kind of case. But if it does put in like a massive down week, like 20%, as in like basically the move that it's done so far in a week or two, I'm down to just be like, okay, this is capitulation. This is where maybe I want to get it back. But so far, so bad. That's what I would say.
So far, so bad. Fair enough. In the altcoin world, I mean, you didn't post any amazing altcoin pumps as they went up. So you were seething, sidelined, angry, in despair, which is what I learned from Twitter. What do you think of, I mean, alts in general? Because it was a big part of your thesis that this ought to be BTC dominant. And even if alts go up, that on the relative pair, they stay sort of suppressed. And the underlying reasoning was that, you know, we're still not in mega new inflow, lift everything type of season. So it'd be better if we had the flows concentrate around the existing narratives as opposed to get split up and bifurcated between BTC, ETH, alts, and so on. A lot of alts have done really well. And especially in the last couple of weeks, it feels like we saw a lot of offers get lifted and funding rates finally started to reach frothy-ish areas compared to where they have been historically. And there's just been a lot of altcoin volatility in general, especially with some of the outliers. Now, again, evidence that it's not some new regime necessarily is that there have been no sort of sectoral pumps or anything of that nature, right? If anything, we've been running a sort of 2021 Remembrance Act, and, you know, Solana's been pumping and AVAX has been pumping as a sort of proxy beta to that, and all sorts of other things. But looking at alts now, what's your view on these, if any? Is it still sort of trade the outliers because they're volatile? Is it still bearish alts because, you know, this flow has been sufficiently split up between BTC and now ETH has a chunk and now people are chasing altcoins? What do you think as someone who hates all of these coins?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit tough. I mean, one of the reasons why it was pretty easy for me to flip from quite aggressively bullish to quite defensive was these altcoin pumps. It's something that generally tends to happen during the late stages of a run. Even like that doesn't have to mean the run is over. It's just like sometimes you have like a run, Bitcoin goes up, and then altcoins go up, and then you get a pullback of like what we've had before, 20-30%, and then the same thing repeats, right? You have Bitcoin running up, then you have altcoins running up, and then you get a pullback again. So you can have multiple of these kind of mini cycles in a big cycle. So I'm not saying like, okay, the cycle's over, but it's easier for me. Like, for example, today Dogecoin went up, right? Like a bunch. And it's easier for me to be kind of convicted in my sells and just in general stay out of the market when the altcoins are doing well. Now, obviously, depending on where you are at in your crypto journey, you want to catch these altcoin moves because you can make, like, they sometimes go up like 40-50% in a day. You're not going to get that on Bitcoin or ETH. So I'm not saying no one should be trading this, but just from like a general kind of market viewpoint, it's easier to sell for me. Like the majors, it's easier to sell them when the altcoins are doing somewhat well. And I think in general, like if I'm right on my thesis that Bitcoin is gonna chop or go down in the next few months, like in the next, like this month and next month, then I think like something that we've been seeing that's a little bit like that's been new in the last few years has been that the altcoins have been going up when Bitcoin's going up. And they've not really been pulling back too much in general. Like, I mean, this has just been up only for these altcoins. So like even when Bitcoin started pumping, Solana just outperformed to the upside. So I could see, because stuff has to pull back, and they usually do aggressively pull back, like altcoins at some point, at least wick somewhere, and I could see that be caused by just Bitcoin going down at this point. But I don't have strong views, and I don't have any altcoins. I have a bunch of ETH left that I'm trying to sell, or like in the process of selling, but nothing major on the altcoin front. So my opinion is just like not really that important, and it's like coming from someone on the sidelines, right? So like if I'm like, the altcoins are going to go to zero, maybe it's because I'm coping on the sidelines. I don't know. I don't have too strong a view.
Fair enough. I think the market's been quite generous in this 30K-ish BTC period, because unless you were in ETH, you could just trade altcoins sort of independently, right, on their own, and trade their local trends. Especially the outperformers have been particularly sticky, like Solana and some others. So that's been good. But I agree in terms of, like the whole underlying argument of, it might sound absurd, because the premise, the argument that you made was essentially, I don't like when altcoins go up, it makes it easier to sell majors. And that might sound counterintuitive if just taken at face value. But the underlying argument there is essentially the altcoins going up at BTC monthly resistance with the sticky funding rates is a sign of froth, right? Or at least overextension to some extent, or risk on, however you want to define that term. So that's really what's sort of going on under the hood. And it's not particularly helpful that the futures and the perps getting aggressive takes place after 3, 4, 5 weeks of zero pullbacks and, at local extremities. That sort of makes it really tricky, because that fresh open interest that's being tagged on is particularly vulnerable for flushes, liquidations, what have you. They're pretty time sensitive. That's the effect that funding has, right? It just makes it really bloody expensive to hold a position. And you're doing the maths in your head, like, okay, I'm paying X% in funding every day, which means X% per week or whatever. And you need to have some sort of P&L, payoff in your mind to make the funding rate costs worth it, because it really does start to add up, especially if it starts eating into your margin and you have several concurrent positions open. It can turn into a shitstorm really quickly. So if you have funding stay high on altcoins, but then the market itself isn't moving and your P&L isn't going up, that kind of bleed can make you very susceptible to just puking. And when one pukes with these, a lot of them will puke, and you get this kind of cascading effect. That's, I think, my best understanding of what happens on like a micro structural level anyway.
Yeah. On top of that, like when altcoins go crazy, right, people just sell their Bitcoin to get in on it. They're like, why the fuck am I holding ETH? Why the fuck am I holding Bitcoin when these altcoins are going up? So this is something that happens like a lot during rallies. It's basically like a bunch of people making money with the majors, and then seeing other people make more money elsewhere, and then they want to get in on that, and they just sell their majors. And the market usually at that point is already quite overheated. So you have a little bit of selling there. You have a little bit of leverage elsewhere. You have a bunch of people basically being like, maybe I'm not making this amount of money on altcoins, but I can just lever up on Bitcoin and ETH, because if the altcoins are doing well, like they're doing well too. So let me just lever up. And then you have a bunch of people at risk, right? Like of getting wiped, because people are moving out of Bitcoin into altcoins, people levering up, all that kind of stuff, which just leads to sometimes lower prices. Doesn't always. Sometimes they get bailed out by new people coming in, and this can always be the case, right? Like when retail comes back, oftentimes like people in shitty positions actually get bailed out and are actually then in great positions. But you have to, like, if you want to bet on that, that's quite a risky business, I think. So gotta be very, very good and very careful in those circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Which also sort of naturally brings us on to the ETH spot ETF application point. Now, I think the basic argument one can make is, well, the BTC spot ETF was really bullish for the market as a whole. And now we don't just have one bullish ETF, Don. We have two. We have Bitcoin and ETH. Why isn't that better than just... Isn't two bigger than one mathematically, numerically? How could an ETH ETF possibly make you bearish?
I mean, the thing is, like, technically, yes, it's good. But just looking at it, there's a certain amount of people that are gonna buy into crypto because of an ETF. And in general, like the market does well when Bitcoin does well. This is something that people always try to argue with me about, but it's something we've seen over the last like 10 years, right? Like Bitcoin does well, altcoins do well, right? As in like the entire market doesn't disappear, you don't have too much risk. Bitcoin does well, crypto does well. But what happens when you have, like, we had this whole narrative with the Bitcoin ETF, and that started heating up and started getting more and more interest and more eyes. And people are like, oh shit, like this is Bitcoin, it's pretty, like, because people, what you have to realize, a lot of people that like or know crypto, they go rug pulled on other projects, right? So now they're like, oh, Bitcoin's getting ETF. Let me buy Bitcoin, right? And that has been happening basically since 25K. One of the main reasons, like the people that are already in are buying Bitcoin because they're like, oh yeah, I want to have a piece of that. Like people that were in but are now out, but just like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna buy some Bitcoin. But now that we have the ETH ETF too, all of those people have to decide whether they want to bet on Bitcoin and ETH, and it gets more and more complicated because you have basically the same amount of people that are willing to buy, but they have to be split over Bitcoin and ETH. And making both of those pump is significantly harder than just Bitcoin. And in general, like the ETH pump doesn't really help the ecosystem. Like it does help the other altcoins. Like, I mean, we haven't had any of the ETH pump anyway, but even if we got an ETH pump, it doesn't really help the market as a whole. It just helps the altcoins. And if in the aftermath of ETH pumping, Bitcoin doesn't pump, everything just goes back to zero, like as in like where it started, right? So the ETH thing, like ETH going up, isn't really that helpful. Bitcoin going up is quite helpful, even for ETH. And yeah, it just fractures the bid. Less people interested in buying Bitcoin because they're like, okay, I'm just gonna buy ETH because it's newer, it's more like it's the future of France, whatever. And it's the same narrative, right? So basically, you steal the bid off of Bitcoin at a time where it's basically at monthly resistance, and that's not great. Now, overall, obviously good if there's an ETH ETF too, because I mean, it's just easy to speculate on this crypto thing. But what I think a lot of people also realized is that if you're getting an ETH ETF, we're going to get a lot of other ETFs down the line too, right? It's if you get Bitcoin, and if we get, like, if it's just Bitcoin, it's one thing, but if it's going to be Bitcoin and ETH, you can be sure that we're going to get a Litecoin, XRP, like XRP maybe not, but Litecoin is pretty certain in my eyes if we get an ETH one. And then Bitcoin Cash, I could see too. That would kind of be pretty easy. And then there's other ones too, right? And at that point, then you just open the door. Basically, everyone can buy whatever the fuck they want, which is cool. But it just kind of dilutes the whole thing more and more and more, and then it gets less and less important, which makes the news less and less interesting, which is not a good thing. So I was hoping we would stick with Bitcoin for a while, get that whole ball rolling, and then once Bitcoin is kind of like it's done its thing, you could roll into ETH. But nope, it's just gonna be both. Obviously, Bitcoin is gonna be approved or denied first, but yeah, it's still the same basically, and it's still the same. Like they're at the same stage right now, ish, as in like both are submitted and then just waiting for what's gonna happen next. Not great.
Yeah, I think the argument of just diluting flows is probably the best one, and also just like diminishing impact on the same news acting at the same time. It's just not very helpful. I wish they would have waited a little bit or something of that nature. I think it's also very difficult at this point to argue that the Bitcoin ETF isn't priced in to a very significant degree, if not entirely, because the market's been trading on this narrative for like, since 24K, essentially, since the news came out. We've been trading on that narrative, and I just find it very hard to imagine that if you can. We got the narrative months ago, right? Initially, in the very early stages, the market went up like 1.5x or whatever from that point. And then if you're the person who ignored all of that and waits for the actual day of the approval to buy, outside of like the short-term news pump, I find that group, that cohort of people, I find it very hard to believe that they'll make money. You know, it's like you're so late. You're just so late at that point. And the market's appreciated so much that you're really on the tail end of whatever there is left to squeeze at that point. And I think you're quite likely setting up to be exit liquidity for the traders who, you know, are either news trading with you or have been in that trade for a while, and the news event itself marks the natural sort of conclusion for that trade. So, you know, halving 2.0, Don.
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's like it's quite tough to argue in favor of like, okay, we're gonna get the like, because we have pumped so much, right? Like, it's very hard to argue in favor of, okay, we're gonna get the ETF and then it's gonna be up only afterwards. Like, I think it seems pretty clear at this point that the moment we get the ETF news, you're gonna get a pump and you're gonna get a dump into the pump. That's kind of like my going thesis anyway right now. Could be wrong, could be kind of like 100 IQing this, but I, like you said, I don't really see who's gonna buy that hasn't already bought. And I think a lot of people are just kind of waiting. And this was me too, right? Like, I was waiting for, like, I was really kind of itching to sell. Basically, the moment we hit 37K, I was like, I actually want to sell, but I'm just waiting for the ETF because that's gonna get me a little bit of a better exit. And I think that's kind of like that's kind of what a lot of people are waiting for. And I think it's valid, but I think that's kind of the longer this goes, and I mean, it seems like it's likely to go into next year. That seems a risky trade to take, right? Like, kind of trying to get the last 5 or 10% of the move before the ETF actually comes out, just so you can sell into those news. One, what if you sleep? Two, what if it actually just, like, if everyone bought that wants to be buying? Like, it's not as easy of a trade anymore, I think, and it's not that simple anymore. But I could be wrong.
And what if it gets denied, bro? What about that?
Yeah. I mean, I still think there's a chance it gets denied.
Yeah, like, there's a chance, of course. 100%.
I mean,
there's a chance, 100%.
I mean, it's not like it's super, super likely to me, but I at this point, pretty much everyone is also talking about the fact that it's going to get approved and it doesn't have to. That would actually be a really interesting thing to happen. If it gets denied, I think you just buy the dump. Like, you give it a day or two and you buy the dump.
This is why markets are fucked up, right? It's like ETF approved, look to sell. ETF denied, look to buy. It's like, good luck fucking explaining that to anyone.
Yeah. But I think, like, if it gets denied because everyone is going to be caught off guard, it's actually going to dump like massively, like completely crazy. And I think that'd be an amazing entry because I think if it gets denied, it's going to get approved down the line anyway. Like, they're just gonna try again.
Mate, I'm not ready to trade ETF narratives for like 2 years straight. Oh, can we get something else, please?
If that's happening, we're gonna have that though. I
miserable, miserable.
But yeah, I'm not betting on that. Like, I'm not in the camp like, it's gonna get denied. You're all suckers for buying into it. I'm still in the camp. There's a good chance it gets approved, and I think you're gonna get like a 5 to 10% pop on those news anyway. But that's basically what I'm not expecting more than that. And I think it's probably going to be sold into.
Yeah, there's like a short-term headline trade there, almost certainly. But yes, beyond that, I think the real upsides of having a spot ETF are sort of medium to long-term, because we've really juiced everything in the pre-ETF window, I feel, that we could have. You know, all the delays, all the rumors, all the applications, like, there's been just so much volume traded on that alone. I think the market needs to see the goods at that point. You know, enough sexting, just come over. I don't know how that works. I'm just lifting references from the internet. Okay, great. I don't have anything else to say, really, as far as the markets go. We had a little pop while we were speaking because one of the Bloomberg ETF guys talked about how the SEC is working with the issuers and trying to get them to change rules and stuff, which is seen as constructive because they're not just like ignoring them and then telling them to fuck off. So this is the degree of mental illness now, Don. The fact that, you know, the SEC is in dialogue is bullish news.
Yeah, I mean,
great market.
Yeah, it's great. Like this,
so much
this
fun.
is the price action we're dealing with, huh?
Yeah, this is what we signed up for.
I think in general, like this, like when you get these kind of small time frame pops, one interesting thing to kind of look at is basically it's going to take out the top or the bottom first, right? Like if it basically now you have a range between where it went to, which I think is like whatever 36.8, and where it came from, which is 36k, and if it kind of starts trading above where it went to, that's a good sign of market strength. And if it trades below where it started, that's a really bad sign. So like you kind of have a range here, very low time frame where you can kind of see the near-term strength of the market. If it cannot hold this pump, that's bad. If it can hold that pump, it's good, and it's something that you can kind of keep an eye on. But I think in general, like this kind of trading, like if you're trading one of the ETF guys talking about whatever, like I mean, just fucking stop it. I
fucking stop it. Like an angry parent.
Like, I mean, the thing is, right? Like I had so many people in my comments being like, when I was bullish at 16k, being like, the macro just doesn't allow for prices to go up, right? And now we're trading at fucking 37k, 36k. And they've been made a fool of, not only in crypto, but also in the traditional markets, because those markets also went up. And yeah, that kind of stuff, right? It's nice for short-term stuff, but the market is setting up in a way, like the market is set up to pump or dump in general, right? Like at 16k, we didn't need any good news to go up. And you could kind of argue the same, like you don't need any bad news to go down here at 37, 36, depending on how the market is set up, right? You can kind of use those news as kind of like a guiding light on where the market is going to go. 16k, we had infinite bad news. The market didn't go down. That's a really good sign. If we get the same here, where we get infinite good news and the market doesn't go up, that's a bad sign. And this is kind of how you should be trading these news things, right? Just kind of take the information and look how the market is reacting to it, rather than just taking it like, okay, this is good news, so I have to buy, because that's not going to do you any good, in my opinion, anyway. It's much more important how the market reacts to these things than it is what the actual thing is.
Unless you're in bull market season, in which case if a ticker makes the news, that's it. There's so many fucking bots buying that shit. You can even have a crappy entry and it'll just go up, which is, greener pastures, Don.
Good times.
We've got some news to talk about. Nothing too crazy, but let's transition over. I've got 4 pieces here. The first is that Bitcoin could see significant capital inflow next year as investors anticipate Fed pivot, say analysts. So this is, macro has been a thorn in our side for some time, sometimes accurately, other times not. But Runner XBT had this tweet asking, like, what do you post ETF? What are the narratives going to be that we cling on to? And I think in general, price action is always the best narrative in either direction. And then we just kind of make the surrounding news and facts and evidence sort of, we rationalize it in light of the price action, if that makes sense. I think that's how most of it works. But in terms of, tangible stuff to put in investor reports and sell side research and shit, halving is one that people are talking about, especially, the 1-2 punch of ETF plus halving plus price go up would be, well, I guess that's a 3-hit combo, not to stretch the analogy too far. But then the whole macro rate cuts thing is another one, right? I think at this point, you can make pretty reasonable arguments that Bitcoin is, at least to some extent, a macro asset, whatever that means. Sometimes it fucks us, other times macro saves us. So, it's been more fucking than saving, that's for sure. But, we do get both sides of that coin. So in terms of looking forward to 2024 and beyond, that is a thing that's sort of circulating around as far as, ETF to get us through in the short term, halving as a sort of cherry on top, and then general sort of risk regime fall in line in 2024 onwards as the whole inflation, high interest rates environment thing tapers off a little. Do you find that compelling? Do you care about macro? Do you think it's sort of makes sense as far as having a narrative flow from one to the other, or is this just curve fitting, cherry picked nonsense?
I mean, it's basically saying stock market is going to go up, no? Like
Yeah,
it's basically like
exactly.
at the end of the day, like if you just make it very simple, and I mean, I don't know if it's going to be that simple. Like how inflation is going to be gone now, everything goes up. We had inflation and everything went up, right? Where people said everything should be going down now. And then you're like, okay, inflation's gone now, so everything has to go up. Like,
well, markets are forward-looking. That's the whole thing, right? It's like if you're responding to this stuff as it's happening, you're late by definition to some extent, because you have to assume at least some of the run-up preceding it was the market pricing in that we've reached peak rates and the sort of peak terminal rate's been reached, and from here on it's going to be down only and bleed. Like that in itself attracts some buy flow. So it's not like nobody's going to buy until they cut rates. And then it's like a race, like 3, 2, 1. Okay, they've cut rates. Go, 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 Like it doesn't fucking work that way. You have to price things in before they happen. And that's why you get this kind of wonky stuff where that's why buy the rumor, sell the news works, right? Like if everyone just waited for whatever good thing or bad thing to be confirmed, markets would look completely different. But because they're forward looking, you have to start to basically price them in ahead of time, and then look for exit liquidity to some extent as traders who are late to that specific set of flows or narrative get positioned, and they are your counterparties in that instance. Now, that's not to be some sort of macro bear that like, oh, when they cut rates, it's all going to nuke. But I will say that you should have an expectation that the whole macro rate cut situation will have been priced in to some extent when we actually get there, because that's just markets, right?
Yeah, I mean, and also like we've had a bunch of complete and utter morons. I mean, just look at Reddit on the whole Wall Street bet, Reddit and all of that kind of side of things, just betting on the market completely collapsing because of course it would, because we have inflation, right? Like you had a bunch of people basically, and don't underestimate their retardation and their buying power or like selling power or their squeeze power, whatever you want to call it, because they've just kind of been completely going crazy. A bunch of Americans, and I mean, at this point, all around the world have just basically been gambling away all their money. So that's been kind of interesting to see, like you have big markets starting to kind of behave crypto-esque, because you have a bunch of morons just trading them in a way that you would trade crypto, right? Or like just completely levering up, 0-day options, all that kind of stuff. I'm not really an expert on this. I don't really care. I don't trade this way. So I don't really read into all of their stupid stuff, but I from time to time check like if they're still active, and this is still like a big thing, right? It's turned into a hobby, basically people gambling their money away on the stock market. So like that's also like a thing where if you get squeezes nowadays or like pumps up and down, even in the big markets, it doesn't have to mean like, okay, there's a bunch of people buying. It can just be a bunch of people getting squeezed out of positions, which is quite funny to think about. But yeah, for me, like when I look at the S&P, I think it's at resistance right now. I want to see how that goes in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. If it keeps being strong, I mean, it's very close to all-time high. Maybe that all has merit, but for me, I'm still in the camp that this is probably going to take a little bit longer to fully play out. And if you get like rate cuts, whatever, maybe we get the dumb thing where it starts dumping on it. Wouldn't be the first time that you get like completely retarded price movements on this kind of stuff.
Great lesson in markets, though, right? That'd be a very good sort of pedagogical point, even if painful. Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. There's other stuff in this article about supply scarcity and on-chain stuff, but no.
Yeah,
basically no. Yeah. Bitcoin Ordinals startup Taproot Wizards raises $7.5 million in seed round. So this is Udi, Eric, and
75. No, 7.5.
7.5.
Right?
Sorry, I think I don't know, I probably said 75. I just got confused. I looked at my last P&L, so you'll forgive me for. I'm joking, obviously. 7.5 is probably closer without the million. But yeah, they raised some money for Taproot Wizards, and it's obviously making the Bitcoin maxis, or whatever that group is now called, the sort of conservative contingent of the Bitcoin community. Quite angry, you know, they didn't like it.
Are they still angry?
Yeah, of course.
Because Sailor's on the side of
yeah, he actually
ordinals,
likes
right?
the Wizards, yeah, and the Ordinals specifically. Yeah, sorry. But this is just seen as a sort of Yuga Labsification of what should be hard money conservative type protocol. I still think this is good news, you know, like especially if Bitcoin's going to stay number one, which I think would be good for crypto in general.
Yep.
You need people to at least be interested in it, even if it's not usage per se. And even if the usage is for like collectible type stuff and, you know, symbolic, if you will, I still think it's important to keep sort of innovating in Bitcoin, keep people interested in Bitcoin narratively, use Bitcoin. I don't think just, I mean, this is very unpopular in terms of position with, you know, Austrian economics type of people, but I don't take them seriously anyway, sorry. But like just saving is not using, in my opinion. But that's a very controversial view because for a large number of Bitcoiners, just sort of owning it in your cold wallet is seen as usage. And I'm just not fully convinced that there's enough moneyness outside of simply sitting on it like a, you know, dragon with a pile of gold to carry it through if no one else really gives a shit, right? So all of that is a very roundabout way to say I quite like, even if it's sort of funny, gimmicky, NFT-esque, collectible, experimental stuff, it's nice that stuff is happening on Bitcoin, and it's nice that they're using the technical upgrades on Bitcoin like Taproot to facilitate it. So I'm not ideological on this point at all. I think we shouldn't get complacent about Bitcoin, and certainly with, you know, way down the line with the security fee model concerns, it'd be nice, even if the use cases are niche, that we actually have some use cases on the sort of base layer level.
Yeah, I mean, for me, crypto kind of like lives and dies with Bitcoin. So if you're just kind of like, oh yeah, this is a problem, like the whole fee problem is a problem that's going to get fixed by itself down the line, it gets me a little bit nervous now, right? Because like, I mean, that's just, if you just kind of push something down the line, and you shit talk every new kind of innovation that you get, you kind of just, you're asking for it to go bad. And I'm a fan. I don't really like, you're not gonna see me run around with Bitcoin NFTs. Could be a really nice play, actually. Just thinking about it, didn't really have too much action last cycle. I mean, there was a little bit, but nothing big. Maybe you get a little bit more this time around. Could actually see that be not too bad of a trade. But I'm not interested too much, but I think it's a good thing overall. Like you need some people testing things, and if they don't, and if they're discouraged all the time, you're just not gonna get anywhere. And then we will be like, time flies, right? Like it's 2023 already. It's kind of crazy to think about. And like 3 years back, the whole Corona thing started, right? And in 3 years, the world's gonna look very different. So like, better start now than just put it down the line. So I'm on board, at least spiritually, not money wise, but I'm happy for the whole ordinals, like Bitcoin NFT kind of crew. Yeah, I don't know what the problem is, but maybe I'm just not getting it.
You're just ignorant of the rich intellectual tradition of Austrian economics, Don. That's what it is, but it's fine. You will learn. Yeah. I'll send you the Mises, Hayek, Rothbard textbooks right after this show.
Yeah, you can send me the Gospel of what's he called, Dash Jr., whatever.
Oh, Luke Dash Jr.
Luke Dash. Yeah. I've seen his Twitter. I don't think I need to see much more of that camp.
Least abnormal Catholic. No, I'm joking. Shout out to my Catholics, unless you're one of those priests. Anyway, I'm not gonna. Let's not.
No.
NHL hockey gives the term NFT the cold shoulder with launch of digital collectibles. I find this quite funny. So like, clearly NFTs were just like a thing, right? Like in terms of the moat they set up for people to use Ethereum and get into crypto one way or another. You know, via NBA Top Shots and a bunch of other shit that was mentioned in this article. But like, NFTs had a large cultural impact. You can argue the financial impact was like disastrous or whatever. And people getting their eyeballs burned off at an ape party is not great. And we saw the classic after the fact hindsight dunking from normies being like, well, remember NFTs, they're all dead now, down 99%. Not inaccurate. But also, if you listen to anyone even remotely reasonable during the NFT mania, that doesn't come as a surprise, right? Like first cycle ICO style speculation. You could have asked anyone who's been in the market for longer than, I don't know, 3-4 years. They probably would have told you that this is how it would have gone. But it is quite funny to see the term, given all the public fallout with it, basically get faded, and instead using stuff like digital collectibles, even though, in substance, these are NFTs. And I think we'll continue to see more NFT-ification type of stuff. It is quite funny how in form the objection is to the term itself. Do you think we'll have to rebrand it? So, for example, ICOs, arguably we're seeing a bunch of ICOs happen every single day, right? With token offerings and meme coins and these IDOs, we've sort of very loosely rebranded them depending on the chain that it's on, sort of I, then the letter of the chain O. But like the term ICO itself sort of fell out of favor given what a disaster it was. Do you think the term NFT will have to come up with something else to trick the normies into buying our JPEGs, or are we going to make a comeback once prices go up?
I think people are just not going to realize that they're actually buying an NFT. Like, I think if you like, I generally like the only NFT that I like, right? Or like one of the only ones is basically CryptoPunks. I like them a lot. It's actually something that I was like the entire run up, I was thinking about like buying and when to buy, and I was just like too bearish and ETH to buy them. And then it went up like quite a bit. So now I'm just like, fuck it. But those are the only ones that I really like. But I think in general, like when you the way to kind of make the NFTs stick around for a little bit longer is just by kind of like just in like having something. So like, for example, if you have a game, right? Like let's say you have a normal game, and like, for example, Diablo 3 back in the day, for the people that played it, they had like the auction house, real money auction house, whatever, right? Like if you have a game like that with an auction house like this with in-game currency, if you just kind of like run it like that, have a good game. And I think Kobe actually said something according to this like 2 or 3 years ago, if I remember correctly. If you just have like a good game, basically, and then you convert all of this into like NFTs or whatever, and people still use it the same way, right? Like then you can make something quite nice out of it. If you like, what I've been seeing instead is basically a bunch of people getting a shitload of money for their attempts of making a crypto game or crypto like or NFT stick in general. And they come from the NFT angle, like they're like, oh, we have an NFT, how do we make it fit, right? But I think that's the wrong way around. And then they have a shitload of money, but basically don't make anything of it, and that's it. So I think you need to come the other way around. Like you have something good, and then you need to turn it into NFTs. Like you have to have something that actually people want to use, and then go that way around, I think. And then they don't know that they're having an NFT until it's too late, right? And then you don't need to rebrand into something else. I think NFT is actually quite nice, and I don't think it's too. I don't think it took too much of a reputational kind of hit last cycle that it cannot be redeemed anymore. The ICO thing was a little bit worse because they were promising, like the ICO was kind of promising like people that they're gonna change the world. The NFTs didn't really promise too much. Like anyone that bought an ape picture knew that they were buying an ape picture. So I think that's still salvageable. I think we're gonna stick with NFTs, and but we just have to make something, like we have to have something that works and turn it into NFTs rather than the other way around.
Yeah, that's so much harder though, isn't it? It's so much easier to just raise a bunch of money, promise a metaverse in your roadmap, and then soft rug and blame macro and market conditions. Much more sustainable and self-enriching playbook.
It's easier. And I mean, for the teams, like if you get your 100 million from raising from idiots, or your whatever, I think like BitLord raised like 3,000 ETH or something. No, something like that actually.
Like $2-3 million, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
I almost have to respect that more in a weird way, where it's like in the past they'd come up with white papers and roadmaps and all this other nonsense to essentially trick you into giving them their money, into giving them your money rather. Whereas with large accounts just posting their wallet addresses, it's so brazenly obvious like what it is and what's going on that you can't even feign ignorance if you send your money to that address. So it sort of removes the whole performative act of, oh, this is going to be like, I'm really trying here, and this is like a fundraise for a project and all this future utility, and it's going to be a top X token, whatever. It's one of those, wealth from you to me now, and it's like in your face, and the brazenness and the lack of nuance around it, it's almost refreshing in a really weird way.
It is impressive. It's like I'm always impressed at how, I mean, at the end of the day, and this is something that happens, I think, when you have kind of like easy money, like easy come, easy go, right? Like a bunch of people basically see Bitcoin go up from 16 to 20, 25K. They get in on 25K, maybe even level up a little bit, make a little bit of money, and then like, oh shit, I now need to hit the 100x or whatever. So they're willing to just kind of send some random dude on the internet some money for something that they don't know anything about. It's actually quite impressive, right? Like how that goes. Like this entire space is so fucked up that this is just something people do. Quite funny to me. I've never even considered sending any money to any of these people that just posted their wallet address. Like even if I thought the coin was gonna go 100x, I'd just be like, this is just not how I want to spend my life, right? But apparently it's just how it goes. And I mean, I'm impressed. I'm a little bit sad every time, but I'm also impressed by just like, the straightforwardness of it, like you said, and the like just how dumb people are really at the end of the day.
I feel like you can rationalize it into an intelligent trade though, right? You could say something like the average person sending their money to this address probably isn't the best trader in the world or the savviest. So in terms of table selection, if I can get into the same pool as them and play the same poker game as them metaphorically, and I have to trade against them, it's going to be much easier than me trying to trade against whoever's on the other side of my Bitcoin perpetual swaps order,
Yes.
Does that make sense? It's almost like hey, look, the average person here is probably dropped on the head far too many times at a young age. And so, yes, I don't expect this to be anything in the future or in the medium to long term. But in the short term, if I get to play the game versus these people, that's a good table to be playing at. But maybe I'm giving them too much credit, or at least the average person too much credit.
No, I could see it be like some sort of that, and also they're just like, oh, this guy has reach, he can pump it, and then I can dump it for whatever.
Sure.
2x, 3x.
And even Nansen was tracking some, they've got like different titles based on your wallet history, and there were some smart money people sending ETH to that specific raise. So I'd be surprised if it weren't something like that. Yeah.
Like, because you basically like, this is something very dumb, but people are trading dumb shit all the time, right? And then they're like, there's reputational risk for BitLord, which, I mean, I don't think this like, but they're like, he's not gonna just rug us outright because whatever, he's a public figure. I don't think that holds any merit. But like I could see that be kind of the thought. So basically, like people are trading dumb shit anyway, and the risk of rug is a little bit less than elsewhere, but still, like, it just rubs me the wrong way. It's just kind of like seeing people do this. I'm just like, why the fuck? Like, if you've been around for 10 years in this space, do you really need to? Like, I don't get it. Like, I really don't get it.
You're so censorious, Don. Just let people do what they want with their money. Jeez.
Yes, I mean, people can, and I didn't even post on Twitter about it. Like, I don't care. Like, you do you, but it's just like from both perspectives, right? Like, if you're in crypto and you just like you want to support this kind of action, do you really want to? Like, this is what you do with your money. Do you kind of enable people like that? Don't get it. And then also doing it right the other way around, like doing this thing. Like, do you even like? How come you need it? Like 10 years after being in crypto, like seeing Bitcoin go from sub $100 to 36,000 now. I mean, where's the need coming from, right? Like putting yourself up for legal scrutiny amongst a lot of other things.
Listen, when I post an ETH address, I hope I see some flows from your wallet. Okay, that's all I'm saying. with all this grandstanding. At least you got to support the homies for CredCoin.
Okay. I'm looking forward to CredCoin. Someone's gonna make it. And
someone's gonna make it. Please don't make CredCoin and don't buy it. And it's not my token unless it is. Wink, wink. I'm joking. I'd never do that. Too much of a pussy. But yeah, it's a thing. I think also at this point, the novelty surely has to be wearing off soon, right? It's like, ooh, it's like a large Twitter account having their own project and raising money in this way. Like maybe the first couple of times, because it's so new, experimental, and if market conditions allow it, you can sort of ape and, at least for curiosity's sake, see what's going to happen. But we've got a fair amount of evidence and precedent now for how these things go, and the track record on average isn't exactly amazing, right?
Nope.
As far as these things perform, and meme coins and influencer coins, etc. But I will, again, I look at it with a sick, twisted sense of admiration, that there's no song and dance, and it's just like, here's an address, give me your money, you'll get something back in the form of tokens, and that's it. I just hope the legal advice front is rigorous, because this kind of thing does attract regulatory attention. But
yeah,
what do I know?
Yeah, I think there's better ways to make 2 or 3 millions in crypto.
Yeah, start with 10.
Exactly. But yeah,
I did, as always, save a little bit of good news for the end, which is crypto fund inflows break 1 billion for 2023, led by Bitcoin, Ether, and Solana. So we're seeing some. I think there's just a lot of chasing going on. It seems like, anecdotally and from conversations and just looking at the flows, there were a large number of sort of crypto native funds, allocators, or whatever, that were caught with their pants down, especially in the second half of the year. Get swept up in the macro doom and gloom and all the unlocks and interest rates and post FTX regulatory environment, all of that shit. And then when the market just starts ripping, I mean, good luck explaining to your investors and LPs and stuff why you made like $0 when Solana tripled or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely think there's some chasing going on. There's some justified chasing going on from a narrative point of view, because you can just tell your LPs, hey, yeah, well, macro sucks, but it's not as bad. Plus, we have the ETF, and there are going to be more ETFs, so just let us do the thing. As far as a medium-term trade, I don't love it, as we've discussed. But it kind of makes sense that, I mean, again, price action is the best narrative. And when you have price action like the type we've had over the last sort of couple of months, it's not particularly surprising to see an uptick in this type of behavior. It's more the sort of sustainability of it that's pretty important. But yeah, that's at least positive, right? Because for a while they were just like net outflows and everything was dead. Now volatility is back and inflows are back, and that's pretty good. I just feel like the specific narrative that's been attracting the bulk majority of those types of buyers, we're on the tail end of ETF upside speculation season. Aside from the approval pop news itself, I think that it's quite likely we get some sort of cooling off before the larger structural effects start to kick in. It's starting to feel increasingly priced in and increasingly crowded from a large time frame swing perspective, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of negatives coming too, right? I mean, it's not like it was quite funny, because at 16K, like if you asked anyone, they could have listed you like 100 reasons why you shouldn't be buying, and now everyone's just like blindly buying into monthly resistance. And I mean, I was kind of talking shit about it for quite a while, but like the shift in people's behaviors and thinking is quite extreme, right? You go from, you cannot buy because of macro, you cannot buy because of there's a bunch of FTX dumping that's going to happen, there's a bunch of Mt. Gox dumping that's going to happen, there's a bunch of unlocks, blah blah blah, all of that stuff.
DOJ.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally like people were talking about this at 16K all the time. I haven't seen anyone mention this in the last, I don't know, month. Like, no one gives a fuck, right? And this is just gonna goes to show that the market can, what the market actually cares about can change very quickly. And that's something that you have to be prepared for, right? Like, sometimes people are like, where the fuck did this narrative come from? But I mean, it's been there, it's just been ignored. And so if you get, imagine this dumps a little bit, you're going to have all of these back, and people are going to be like, oh yeah, it's so obvious that it's dumping because of these and these unlocks. And the moment people pull these out again, it's probably time to buy. So it's just how it goes. People people just go with the flow, and sometimes you have to be a little bit quicker than them. Sometimes not. Sometimes you have to be retarded. I think this is like not the time yet, but I could be misjudging. That's the hardest part about trading crypto, I think. Like figuring out when to go completely brain dead and take the dumbest setups because it's just that bullish versus being a little bit risk averse. I usually just err on the side of caution. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. I guess we'll find out, as always. That's all we have for this week. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, leave a like on this video and leave a comment. All of those things are very much appreciated. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. Do not keep any more funds than you need for trading on any given exchange. The whole point of leverage is to reduce your counterparty risk. And yeah, hope you all have an excellent weekend, and we will see you next week.
Bye.